The thinking nowadays, especially within ufology and even evangelicalism, is it's so binary. It's either or. And unfortunately, the phenomenon we're dealing with, it's much larger. And anybody with a cursory knowledge of this intelligence knows it's eclipsing all of those models. It's pushing us into corners where we are forced to think outside of the intellectual coffin we've been boxed in. But let me suggest this, that in believing in the mask, we empower the intelligence that's wearing it. Imagine intelligence that can fabricate reality. And I say that with intention. The paradox of language we have to employ when describing this phenomenon, it's not an accident. We don't even have the vocabulary to articulate what is occurring. And what draws my attention to this is so fascinating as well is all of these events are seemingly supernatural. And we know they're supernatural because they are supernatural. They transcend that microcosm. But what about these supernatural events that are appearing as natural to us, where the phenomenon is hiding in places we didn't know it was hiding in? People doing things, committing things, and believing, all of this, it's intertwined. And so there is an ontological connection between us and it.
So from my perspective, we always had this connection. And again, I was seeing this cross-migration of details from one particular phenomena into another field. And then I was finding it in another field, and then another field. So again, looking at this umbrella term and this umbrella situation, I was able to see, wait a minute, and create this hypothesis, which others have arrived at as well, in seeing this is coming from the same source. So from that particular perspective, I wanted to accelerate further and see, right, let's follow the line, let's follow the data. What is there in history that is giving us some suggestions here of what to follow? I started tracking that line, and to the point where I believe we may have identified the source.
The model we're operating off of now suggests that disclosure will come to the future. It will just arrive. And with the emergence of esotericism in building altars in New Mexico, that model implies that disclosure could be wrong in terms of it's in the future. What if disclosure occurred in the past, and because we misunderstood it, it didn't fit our blueprint? For some reason, this is a strange model, but the results and the evidence absolutely suggest this, that there is an intimate connection with building altars, ritual magic, and whatever these entities are. And I'm not even talking about the mask. The problem with the model that I inherited, even with secular ufology, evangelical, all of that combined, is we did not anticipate our rules to only have applied to the mask itself.
We wanted to break apart those encounters, analyze them, and see what was going on. We do have a lot of stories that people will tell us of their encounters. And those stories have value, but they're not everything. But within those particular stories, there tends to be key points of data which are unique. But we're able to take those aspects of those encounters, and we can see those aspects trail all the way back through history. They remain the same. The mask in which it interacts with us always changes, but the phenomena remains the same.
A lot of these beings will project a terror on you that they've created. They fabricated a fear, and they thrust it upon you, and they'll lie in wait to see if you would believe it.
So there's very much like they call this stage managed dreams in ufology.
Yes. Yeah. Of course, there we go. Yeah, we're going to touch on that in the future here, but yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a theatrical performance of some sort where they're using you as a source for something, and it's the ignorance of us, of our human condition. We don't even know what's occurring. We just know something's occurring to us. And so what I learned to do was I wouldn't feed the fear. And so this kind of led me, now when I mentor people to do investigations, the goal here is to feel the fear without being afraid. And how do you do that? Well, you have to remember that a lot of this terror is fabricated by the phenomenon, and it's not really real. And so that's how I kind of learned how to cope with this intelligence. And it was shortly, like maybe a few months after that I had kind of kept building myself and confidence, where I was, okay, yeah, you see me, that's fine. I can't see you. Okay, that's fine. But, I'm not going to feed into that fear. And so shortly after that, it's almost like you kept feeling that energy field just diminishing and weakening.
So you could feel that?
You could feel it. Oh, yeah. It was almost like it was pulsating. Like when I would wake up in the middle of the night after the nightmare, the only way I could explain it was something was right up on me and I couldn't see it. Like imagine, okay, if you will, if a person is right up on you, you can feel it, you can, you know what I mean? It's just all over you, but you can't see it.
Yeah.
That was literally what it was like. And it was crazy. But yeah, so that's how I learned how to navigate around that intelligence. But more than anything, what it began to do is chip away at the model that religiosity had given me as a child, made me question, okay, is it possible that we're wrong, at least in some areas? And so that's what kind of inspired me. It was instrumental, actually, to get me into the field I am now, where I'm digging up some of the root systems and thinking, okay, where do these lead?
You're going to be popular.
I don't. In one crowd, I'll be really popular. Other crowds, they're not going to want me to exist, and that's okay. But what my research is doing more than anything else is it's imploding models that are ready to die. We have to grow. We have to grow. And in order to grow into the data, we have to grow out of the dogma. And that is something that I had to do myself, even as a young individual.
Yeah, I think it's the evolution of what's being called phenomenology now.
Right.
Many people, throwing away the old models, throwing away putting things in boxes and looking way beyond. But I'll be honest, I've been familiar with John Keel's work.
Correct.
All those guys before him. What you bring is yet another angle, which is why I'm really interested in this.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that conclude in your youth? How did that?
Right. Well, I noticed that there were moments where the occultic connection with this intelligence, even the one I was encountering, it would transcend all other models. And I realized that this was not a bug in the phenomenon. This was a feature. This was something that was pervasive. It was a common thematic element interwoven in the fabric of everything we've come to know as paranormal. What is it? It's not just, okay, I'm projecting my knowledge upon the phenomenon. No, it's not an accident. We go to some of the most malevolent hauntings. Okay, what happened? Oh, the occult was present? Oh, wow. To some people, oh my God, they don't like that because it's too dark. Well, okay, that's fine. But if we strip the phenomenon of its malevolent, oh my God, it's all dark. We just look at it and say, okay, unplug. These connections are there whether I like it or not. And they have to be talked about. And so in a way, in order for us to gain more access, we have to stare into the darkness that's been staring at us, no matter the cost.
So how did your father feel about this?
When I started getting really deep into the research, to some of the stuff you and I have talked about before and on my other shows and stuff, where it's disconcerting because it's not just him. I met a person the other night, is face to face. You start talking to him about it, and if they're not familiar with my research, as you are and others are, you could see it. Because when people like my father and this other gentleman, when they put the pieces I'm putting out there together, and they see the ingredients that make up this recipe, it's literally like, okay, I got to step away for a little bit and I got to go digest this. Because if what you're saying is true, this is a pervasive intelligence that is symbiotic in nature, parasitic at times. And it's leading us into this gloomy labyrinth of deception to the point where we're wondering, is this even real? And that right there, that intelligence is, it cannot be classified as solely demonic. Because not only does it not do demonic things, but if we're looking at the demonic model in terms of how deceptive they are, okay, look how deceptive this is. It made you believe they're demonic.
Well put, yeah, absolutely.
So when I went into demonology, I was looking at, for those who are bibliophiles like I am, T. Whitten Davies' work, Michael Heiser's work, and then I went to Father Sinistro of Amino's work, and these individuals, they all... Furthermore, Esther Amori's work about women's divination and biblical literature. What I went basically down into was esotericism within the Holy Writ, the Bible itself. What were they doing? What were they performing? Were they performing rituals? Why were they building altars? And so once I started to learn some of the nuances of the forces within Mesopotamia, the darker forces, then I evolved into some of the witch era literature, the debug phenomenon in the 16th century. And then I leaned into ufology. And what I realized was that there is a draconian shadow that had swept over all of the world, constantly changing and reincarnating into different, seemingly various identities. Meanwhile, what we're realizing, at least now, is, okay, yeah, it does appear to be changing, not just according to the archetypes of the culture, but sometimes inspiring them entirely to allow us to believe, just like in evangelicalism, just like in ufology, that the beings themselves, the intelligence plays by a certain set of rules. And then because of those little pockets of incarnations, we have different strands and different fields of research, not realizing that there is an intelligence out there folding its arms and it's manipulating the masses. As long as we can believe in the mask and that incarnation, we'll never have the interest of saying, scrap it all. Let's start from square one. What do we really know about this intelligence?
And it's interesting that those masks are sort of the foundations of those masks.
Yep.
You could argue, have been engineered by the entities themselves.
Of course. And I'll go a step further with that. Even the new mask that it wears, it consists of pieces of the older masks it has worn. And the problem within the field is, if our researchers do not have a good historical understanding of where it's been and the bloody footprints in the snow, they won't understand, okay, yeah, all I see now is its modern incarnation, but I never appealed to the ancient incantations. And it's not until you got both of them in the same model and you realize, oh my God, they're sourcing their secretions from the same people, the same ways, same methodologies, same modus operandi. But it's convinced us by virtue of prophets, of propaganda, that, hey, listen, I'm this and I'm that. Meanwhile, again, yes, it's diversified its identity. It's a lot like this. I'll say it like this. And I don't know where we're going after this, but when you're dealing with what's called modelism and people who are so dogmatic into the model, the symbiotic relationship the phenomenon has between it and the experiencer, or some of these researchers themselves, it consists so much of that individual's worldview. And I've seen this, we just saw it recently, where if the research or even the lecture, if it implodes that model, the individual thinks, by virtue of imploding that model, it's also imploding my worldview. Yeah. And so that's where the intelligence has been so deeply ingrained in the consciousness. It's just like I was telling in the lecture, it has created a mask made up of us.
How does this, tell me how it crosses over directly for you into ufology?
Yeah, well, the problem is, okay, when you get into witch era literature, incubi, succubi, the debug, there is the pervasive stench of hybridization throughout all of it. And long before ufology took its dawning first breaths, we had Father Sinister of Amino going into homes and collect samples left on women's bodies and on their clothing. We've seen that with Betty Hill. We just didn't know what it was. We thought that was modern. It's not. So when you look at both fields of research, hybridization, check. Sourcing of secretions, check. All of the above. The only addition ufology gave us, or we thought ufology gave us, was the introduction of technology. But again, that's not even true. Because in witch era literature, Eros and Evil, by Ariel Masters, he details accounts where witches are being abducted on demonic flights. Wait a minute. It's weird.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, it should. Unless we're dogmatists. Don't want to look at the data, but yes, and so they're taken on demonic flights, and to a certain point, these experiencers and practitioners believed they were copulating with demonic husbands and spirit wives, until somewhere their technology of the proto-intelligence failed. And now the practitioners, this is incredible. This blew my mind because it was the missing piece. The practitioners are looking around, and this is not a mountainside. It's not a graveyard. They were being poked and prodded by metallic objects. It was appealing to the flesh and the senses blinding us by what we could see, deafening us by what we could hear, meanwhile targeting a part of our potential we were ignorant of. So that bleeds into, this is a witch era literature, 16th, 17th centuries, that leads us into this idea that at any time the intelligence, this gets into Dr. Carla Turner's work too, can introduce a virtual reality scenario. What are we really dealing with here?
The agenda, if you like, in according to some ufologists, of hybridization and taking over the Earth. How does that correlate with your research?
Right. Well, we do know for sure that at the advent and building of altars, there was an influx of technologies that transcend the microcosm of the known world. You're talking about practitioners erecting stone altars that are uncut by human hands. And then as soon as these start arriving in the Levant, next thing you know, there are idolaters and necromancers carving the names of unclean spirits into small pieces of metal and implanting them into bodies at the same time, right? We would call that nanotechnology or metamaterial, something where literally consciousness merged with technology. This is in the Levant, in the late Iron Age, my friend. It should not be happening. And if we were ufologists in that time, we'd certainly believe that's ufology. It has to be. It's not.
Yeah, that's an alien implant.
That's an alien implant, my friend. Yeah. So no, this is ancient technology by the same proto-intelligence we've seen throughout history. But during that time that you see the implantation of consciousness, and then you see the hybridization program begin, when whatever was existing out there in the darkness wanted to become incarnate. What did it do? Build me an altar. I'll exchange some technology with you. Incredible how it mirrors ufology. We're not even there yet in this interview yet, but they're going to see it. They're like, wait a minute. They can't ignore it at this point, my friend. But yeah, so it's at that time you have the erection of altars, then you have the hybridization program, then you have the introduction of some form of what demonologists called magical technologies. What does the government think? Oh, they called it WFM, weird freaking magic. Seems like we're still in the same boat thousands of years later. And so, but at the advent of all of those at the same time, then in comes the hybridization program. Now women are being abducted, if you will, or are encountering entities in their dreams that they're communing with, and the entities themselves are masking their true images with that of lovers, boyfriends, husbands. And yet during these scenarios of incubi, debuk, whatever you want to call them, at the very end, it was boom, take the mask off. Now I have you where I want you. Now I'm going to play by rules you did not know existed. And that was the beginning of the hybridization program. Now how did they perceive it? Well, here's how they framed it. It wasn't the merging and splicing of DNA. It was literally apparitions creating bodies that looked like the apparitions that possessed them. It is a self-replication of species that and I'm going to tell you straight up, this is where I'm at. I'm calling it necronetics. I don't think I've ever told you about this yet. I'm introducing a new field of research, necronetics, the way they have self-replicated throughout history. It's a version of genetics and necromancy. And so this is what I believe they were doing. But they were creating bodies that looked like their own apparitions. Not like the image of the husbands that they appeared as. No. See, now people understand this too. While that was happening at a micro level, the phenomenon was doing that to our species on a macro level. It was also wearing a mask and leading us into precarious situations of involuntary initiations. And then when it's done, pulls the mask off and you're making eye contact with something you didn't even know existed. So it's happening on a personal level as well as a level with us as a species. But so that was their idea of the hybridization program. And then that's what kind of led me into comparing notes. Are they doing the same thing under a different guise? And I need to make this understood too. Remember what I told you before, that, okay, there was nothing that demonology had. There's nothing that ufology had, rather, that demonology didn't until it was technology employed. Well, now we have it in witch era literature. Now we have it with the ritual of Teraphim. They were the first implants in antiquity. Now, what this means, and thank you for letting me talk, because some people don't let me get this deep. What that means is if our model is wrong about the phenomenon, that means our timeline's wrong. And if our timeline's wrong, then disclosure didn't happen and won't happen in modernity, because that's technology. That means disclosure happened with the erection of the very first altars. Disclosure happened when they're out there underneath the open sky wanting something to become incarnate. And we didn't understand that because the phenomenon had veiled its bloody footprints by virtue of diversifying its identity.
And of course, now that shines light on the amount of occultism in ufology.
Right.
Can you talk about that a little bit for us?
Of course. This gets back to whether or not the occult is a bug in our ability to contact them, if it's a feature. Now, this is what I said in my awakening lecture. I won't get into it deeply because you guys got to watch it. But the thing is, whether or not we want to agree with the fact that the occult is present, it doesn't matter. People say, I don't believe it. It doesn't matter if you believe it or not. Doesn't make it untrue. It exists. It's going to exist long before. It existed long before I believed in it. It's going to exist long before if you don't. The truth of the matter is this. Altars originated first, and then came the introduction to technologies that transcended our microcosm at that time in history. It wasn't technology first, and then let's make altars. No. Build me an altar. And here's the thing. I'm going to lead the practitioner, just like they do, the intelligence does. I'm going to lead the practitioner. I want you to make stones uncut by human hands. Where do I get them? I want you to go to this location. Well, can I build an altar in my room like Albert Bender did in ufology? No. That's one thing. That's kind of different. But I want you to go out in front of underneath the open sky where you can see the cosmology of souls. And then I'll become incarnate. And then during those rituals came the technology that influenced and changed the entire future of our species. And now in modernity, our leading scientist in ufology in America, he has technology. He has an iPhone in his back pocket. He has DoorDash, Uber Eats, okay? His security system at home is electronic, his cars, all of that. But you know what? Okay, instead of sending a probe from NASA out into space to contact the other, I'm going to do something that will transcend all my. I'm going to go back into the desert, and I'm going to make an altar made of unhewn stone underneath the cosmology of the stars, and then the phenomenon will become incarnate. That's not modern. See, that's the problem. Ufology has convinced us that this is a modern phenomenon. No, it's a modern incarnation that's responding to ancient incantations. And here's my point. If we want to study the phenomenon as a tree, don't study its branches, study its roots. That's what they're realizing is, yes, we're going to go back to the roots. And what the roots are is they want to be worshiped. The model that's being presented is symbiotic. We know that by virtue of how they were grooming, and they were grooming experiencers to give consent underneath the spell of a lie. And so we know that it was symbiotic in the sense that there's something in me, there's something about you that's in me, and we're going to coexist. And so the model of symbiotic relationships is that it co-evolves with us. Well, yes, it is. It has. It's evolved according to our awareness of it. And more than that, it's evolved in order to evade us. And so when you look at the way it's tracked its bloody footprints throughout history, you start to see that there is a point in time when it began to be parasitic. And this is what we know in evolution and biology, that when that intelligence goes from the first stage of symbiosis to parasitism, it leans, this is incredible, leans all the way back throughout history, tracks all the evolutionary processes of its own existence, and says, this is everything I've learned about you during these stages of my evolution. And guess what? Adds that to its newest incarnation. And in the parasitic model, then it goes directly to us, wearing pieces of our own species, of our own archetypes. Oh yeah. I'm the Virgin Mary. I'm Lady Fatima. Oh yeah, I'm God. I'm Jesus. I'm Muhammad, right? Or I'm your husband. What is it doing? What is it doing? It's performing the parasitic mimicry. No wonder when people, like I said, we saw this the other night. When I go into my lectures, I've seen it on shows hundreds of times. when I go into my lectures and the information I'm bringing forward, when that implodes the mask it wears, it is so intertwined and interconnected. It's so parasitic in some people's world that they themselves feel like they just, what do I have? And so what I'm suggesting here is, yes, in the parasitic model, the last thing they would do is destroy us. That's and I've always hated that argument because I thought it was very lazy. It's just lazy. It's not very intelligent. Yeah, well, they would just kill us all. No. Not if they're using us to self-replicate their species. See, parasitism, by definition, is where a parasite finds the host. And it aids itself, literally adds things, and it sources things for itself based upon the struggle and suffering of the other species. The moulter is a species within. Let's begin with the model called parasitism. Parasitism involves a three-pronged issue within specifically what we would call the hybridization program within the context of ufology. Number one, we have the host, usually called the experiencer. Number two, we have the hybrid, usually called the fetus. Then the third one is a strange kind of mutation of the two, one that I'm going to highlight and emphasize tonight, because I believe the entire hybridization program within the context of ufology has been stripped of its true nature, stripped of its true historical context, and by virtue of compartmentalizing this intelligence, neglecting to understand that long before ufology took its dawning first breaths, this intelligence was self-replicating its own species through wombs and through words. And the way they self-replicate is very interesting because it also has an occultic connection that we will see here very shortly. Number one, it's important to understand the nature of this intelligence. The purpose of the incantation is incarnation. Whatever intelligence we're looking at has literally built ladders made of words, connected and combined what we would consider to be materialist scientism with an esoteric value. Now, this all originated, according to my research, it's pretty much the same time. Scholars agree it's somewhere near the late Iron Age was when the first altars began to be erected. This right here in front of you is an altar that was discovered by Jewish Israeli archaeologists in the Valley of Megiddo. It's called a horned altar, but I would like us to pay attention to this because when you're looking at altars, specifically within this historical context, each and every one of them, I can imagine like, where's he going with this? I promise I'm going somewhere. Each and every one of them were designed quite literally, not according to the practitioner's wishes, but according to whatever intelligence was trying to incarnate by virtue of these incantations. One of which was what's called an earthen altar. And an earthen altar is unique in the sense that when the practitioner would emerge from his personal quarters, he would go and he would collect earthen stones uncut by human hands. He would then collect them, construct an altar underneath the sky itself. And then it was literally designed in such a way that when the burnt sacrifice or when the ritual took place, the entity that was wishing to inhale and to incarnate would be present somewhere within the cosmology above. It was around this time, according to my research and according to archaeologists, that a strange form of idolatry began to emerge. This strange form of idolatry not only consisted of earthen altars, but it consisted of rituals and incantations designed for this intelligence. Again, through the incantation came the incarnation. Now, many of you would look at this, and you're probably like me, you would say, okay, that's gotta be an implant within ufology, right? Look at the picture, that's gotta be something that has to do with an experiencer. Well, what if I were to tell you this was called the ritual of teraphim? This ritual accompanied, again, the emergence of the earthen altar. And this was an esoteric interconnectivity between the intelligence that was doing its best to incarnate in the human condition of the practitioner. This was a necromantic ritual in which the practitioner would go and find a small piece of metal, carve the name of an unclean spirit, as they knew it, into the metal, and somehow, by virtue of what scholars have come to learn was magical technologies, there was memory in that metal, the consciousness of the very entity that they were seeking to conjure, the consciousness of the very entity that was seeking to become incarnate is now inside of the metal that is being implanted into another body. The memory of this entity, the belief systems, the consciousness, merging with this meta material or nanotechnology in a way, it began to stretch its way throughout that second social skin. And now, this is quite literally what they were saying. Now, the entity can see through the eyes of the experiencer. Now, that's not just what they said in biblical antiquity or Mesopotamia or in ritual bowls. That is quite literally what experiencers are being told by these beings we're going to discover tonight. Now, this is what I call replication by implantation, where the consciousness is intertwined with the technology that is conjured. It's very important. So this is called replication by implantation, and somewhere in their pathology, this intelligence, again, evolving according to our awareness of it, studying our motives, our beliefs, and noticing the variances and how we have co-evolved next to it. Then somewhere again, with these altars, suddenly we have the ritual of teraphim. Then we have what's called the red ritual, also known as the ultimate black mass. I know it's getting dark, but just follow me. This is called replication by impregnation. This is the hybridization program before UFOlogy took its very first breaths. This was considered in antiquity to be a dream demon who literally would induce the experiencer into a dreamlike state, would overshadow them, specifically their victimology then was women, and would implant a fetus inside. Now, this is important because now we're discovering an ancient pathology of what I've uncovered to be the molters. Self-replication of their species, using the mortal portal of wounds and words to incarnate among us. Is it connected to altars? Absolutely. Of course it is. Is it connected to what we would consider to be the implantation of consciousness by virtue of metamaterial? Absolutely. And all of these methodologies emerged in history at the same time. This is the byproduct of an entity that would diversify itself. And in many cases, it would lean into archetypes that fit our worldview. There are times where the phenomenon would put on that mask and play the role of the demon. Oh, the holy water works. Until suddenly, out of nowhere, the pathology mutates and that proto-intelligence steps out of the mask, makes eye contact with us as a species. And only then do we realize, wait a minute. There were laws and rules they were playing by. We were ignorant of. And there seems to be a control mechanism of perception management employed.
The aspect of demonology is simply another mask. It's another mask of the phenomena that lies behind that. And that's something that we need to step forward to the line and identify the masks, but be prepared to move them out of the way to examine what's behind the curtain. And that is where the value in what we're doing today comes into effect, because we're getting people now not to accept the initial details that are being delivered, whether through seance or through an encounter with an alien, an alleged alien, or whatever the case may be. We're now saying, and we're setting some ground rules for folks who are investigating to say, don't accept the first thing, challenge it. Because if something is there for your benefit, it's not going to mind a few questions for clarity. What we tend to see with the phenomena, though, is that there's a deceptive edge to it. And when you do question it, you go, excuse me, like Columbo, one more thing, that the phenomena backs off immediately. It does not want to answer that. It does not want to be discovered.
Number one, we have to study it with the ability to embrace any and all dark aspects. That's the very first step to this. Now, to answer your question specifically, we don't even know the rules they're playing by. We don't know the game they're playing. And in many cases, they'll tell us to do a certain thing or to do a certain... For instance, scientists we both know of, out in the middle of the New Mexico desert, building altars of uncut stone, literally designed for not just magic, not just ritual magic, but sacrifices. Now, there's only two possibilities. He doesn't know why he's doing it, or he does. See, in the 16th century, where we were early demonologists, we're still trying to determine what these things were. Why can they appear as deceased loved ones? Are they horns and hooves in entirety? Or, is there some kind of other category they don't fit? When that happened, the Vatican took authority over it and just pretty much dominated the entire field of demonology. This is what it is. It's institutionalized. Anything outside of that blueprint doesn't exist. And then yet it's antithetical to the earliest demonology that was being done. Father Sinistro of Amino was throwing amulets and holy water on a pagan demon, wondering why his model wasn't working. Then he called it a pagan demon, which is a paradox. But what we're witnessing again is these current models, both in history and today in modernity, they're failing because we've compartmentalized, in my opinion, a singular intelligence. And when we compartmentalize and denominate a singular intelligence, it gives it an easier way to mask itself.
I think there's great value in analyzing an encounter that someone may have with whatever appearance it should take. Its valuation becomes exceptionally important within the first 20 seconds. And that is a rule that I've set out. I said the 20-second rule, that is exceptionally important to understand. Within those 20 seconds, we are given the information as to what the nature of this phenomena is. And if we refuse to see that, if we refuse to acknowledge that, hear it, or feel it, then we're lost to it.
So, my fellow enthusiasts and researchers, can we embrace the enigmatic, harness the power of knowledge, and propel our understanding of the paranormal to new heights? Together we can shed light on the mysteries that dance in the darkness, ultimately enriching our perceptions of reality and offering glimpses into the vast expanse of the unknown. New Age libraries are filled with fluff and can lead us astray, entangling us in a web of falsehoods by proposing methods of communication with the ancients that effectively work, but don't address the pitfalls and potential risks by entering the arena unprotected. When we fail to grasp the true essence of existence, we open ourselves to the possibility of being taken off course and entering a labyrinth of deceptive assurances and divisions. The first rule in navigating this treacherous path is to refrain from succumbing to the alluring temptation of indulging in the offerings that claim to come from divine sources. The second rule reminds us that these sources themselves are not gods, despite their attempts to present themselves as such. The third rule: neither are they our ancestors. The first rule, not to feast on the food of the gods, serves as a reminder to approach these enticing offerings with caution. Just as consuming too much of an intoxicating substance can cloud our judgment and impair our ability to reason, feasting on the promises of these so-called divine sources can cause us to lose sight of the truth. It is crucial to maintain a healthy skepticism and not be allured into accepting these promises as unquestionable truth. The second rule, reminding us that these sources are not gods, encourages us to question their authority. Often these deceptive figures present themselves as all-knowing, all-powerful entities wielding the secrets of the universe. However, it is vital to remember, when pushed, that they possess the worst aspects we see in humanity and are prone to errors, bias, and ulterior motives.
Materialist ufology says, okay, well, they've been seeding us with technology. Well, that's not what's being demonstrated in the methodology here. They didn't seed us with technology. They seeded us with esotericism. They seeded us with ritual magic. And then by virtue of conjuring them, they conjured us. And now we are in this dynamic, this nebulous sociological dynamic where we're being lied to. Come out here. We're going to go conjure the beings. Meanwhile, you just drove an hour and a half to an undisclosed location, spent 2 hours of your own time to get there, not realizing these are their rules.
Working in the media and in ufological circles, and certainly in the paranormal circles, is that the information has to be presented in the right way.
Correct.
Especially the stuff you're talking about, because as you said, it can be unsettling.
Yes.
It's deep.
Right.
It's partially academic.
Yes.
But at the same time, if people watching this really, really want to know, you have to open your eyes and ears to this information, no matter how uncomfortable, as you said earlier.
It is. And what's scary about this as well is there is no small sacrifice here. It doesn't come cheap. You have to pay attention. And in that paying of attention, and I know this by virtue of experience, I've done shows where, you touch on something and what was that? And that's them. I've done shows before where a 4-hour show, cameras on, we're supposed to be live on, just recorded anyway, YouTube, the whole gamut. When we're done after 4 hours, everything failed. Everything was never recorded. YouTube, everything failed. Crazy stuff. I've been on shows where before I got on there, the hosts have their headphones, and I'm specifically talking about the Molters, which is the class of species we're talking about now, the intelligence. And when I first get up there to talk about the Molters, hi, I'm blah, 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 the Molters, and all of a sudden a voice, I couldn't hear it. They could hear it on their side. One of them spoke into one ear, one headphone. Another one spoke in the other headphone on the other ear. Oh, okay, we're here. Let's talk to him. Let's talk to him. He's here. Let's talk to him. The other one says, well, not until he can hear us. Wait until he can hear us. In one of the hosts, this is Kristen Johnson from Dark Horse Paranormal in Rhode Island. She said, Nathaniel, she took her headphones off and threw them on the ground and ran out of her house. Because people don't understand. People think evil feels like evil. And when you actually get into the presence of evil, it's not something, and here's what's scary, you can kind of quantify a serial killer, right? Okay, well that's, oh wow, you're going to do these, okay, yeah. We understand it, it's still terrifying, we understand it. But when you have some kind of alien evil in that sense, where the rules that we apply to everything in this known reality do not apply to it, and we have no control, that's what she experienced. And she said that out of like 25 years of paranormal research and investigations, it terrified her because it was almost like cosmicism. And it's an H.P. Lovecraft philosophy where you don't matter. You don't matter. Now, the problem with this, again, is we've compartmentalized science and esotericism. First models, especially within materialistic ufology, nuts and bolts, no consciousness connection. Certainly none. And yet, the intelligence we're discussing tonight has emerged not from science, mind you. Science almost was a secondary consequence to esotericism. If you look at the examples I showed you earlier, the ritual of teraphim, that came to fore because something wanted to become incarnate. And when that something wanted to become incarnate, the next thing you know, you have the erection of idols and altars. It's not a bug, it's a feature. And what's really disconcerting as well is that when people, I tell people this all the time, and they're locked in such a binary model of the phenomenon to where it's either angels or demons. Could I suggest to you that both are incomplete in and of themselves? Can I suggest to you that it's no different than the spider being whipped back and forth by an intelligence that realized in order to capture my prey, I have to appear as what my prey would want to capture? Now, it's a unique model, but we have to understand something, that there is conjuring taking place somewhere. And it's either us or them. And so, actually, it's kind of funny because these case studies in particular, if you look up here, that's supposed to be a lamb, and I'm sure you guys have seen this. There's a lot better researchers that have lectured today than I am. But we're looking, again, at incarnations of an intelligence. In times past, sure, we considered it incubi, succubi. Sure, we considered it debug phenomenon. And more than that, the intelligence allowed us to believe that. There was no self-correcting. And now what we have is something that is unique as well. Now we have practitioners like Aleister Crowley, who is employing ritual magic, and in the middle of one of these incantations, this main entity on your left appears. Now, what am I suggesting? I am suggesting that there is an intelligence here, that for whatever reason it wants to become incarnate, and it's becoming incarnate by virtue first of ritual. And through ritual comes the technology that we're witnessing. Matter of fact, this occurred with Jack Parsons, one of the great UFOlogists, experiencers, practitioners. He would have what's called the Parsons technique. Now, this doesn't mean he went to NASA and sent out some kind of technological probe out into space, you'd think. No. He was getting his incantations from Mesopotamia, twisting them from a Brahmin and mage. And out of nowhere, he had created this this method of practitioner where he goes in and he does these rituals, and all of a sudden, metamaterials. Well, I thought it was one or the other. It's not. It's not esotericism or science to this phenomenon. They are not dichotomies at all. They're dualities of this intelligence. By virtue of ritual magic, suddenly you have the emergence of technology that transcended what we had. And through this, he began to implement these technologies into his rocket program, which of course it gave us incredible insights in technological advances. But the problem here again is that the models that we are currently trying to understand, that we have modeled ourselves after, they're failing each and every one. And I believe, especially within demonology, it's because we've seen the mask and applied the rules of that mask, thinking they'll work when there's something wearing it that none of these rules apply to. And so in each and every one of these conjurings, there is a leverage experienced. It's not just simply, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do A, B, and C, and I'm going to get something in return. No, there's always something leveraged. Matter of fact, when these altars were first erected, again, in antiquity, they were not designed just for conjurations. They were designed for sacrifices where blood was shed. And by the virtue of shedding of blood, insights into another world erupted in the mind of the practitioner. And now they start constructing technology that far superseded what they knew. Lastly, and I'm going to really dive into this, the CE5 movement, and I have nothing against it, but I do believe that there is something out there that it's just like the fallacy of control that was implemented in the debug phenomenon. If I'm good enough to them, they will be good enough to me. If I go to them in such a way that my intentions are pure, then their intentions will be pure with me. Now, the problem is, because the way this model was structured, it neglected to look at other older preceding case studies, then of course that model would make sense, because I've diversified this intelligence. That's not even what I'm researching. That right there again is the byproduct of an intelligence that's trying to convince us it's one thing. And by us ignoring these other case studies, neglected to realize it's the same. The incantations and ritual magic that we are inheriting from them, they are insights into another world. In that in many cases, what we're considering to be technology is just esotericism, where they don't have to drive a car. They can just be here. But because we have the disability of being, we can't do that. They give us the technology to facilitate things that they don't even have to think about doing. And this is, again, courting the human condition is what they're known for. Always have done that throughout history. Build me an altar. Well, what do you want? I'll give you food. I'll give you goods. I'll bless you. I'll give you good health. Meanwhile, we are sourcing something for them we're completely ignorant of. And at any moment, they could take off the mask of an alien, a demon, dear Aunt Edna, Uncle Tommy, and they could step in. And now what you see, and this is even more interesting, now you see what's almost like one program being overridden by another program, where one is a character and the other one is the author of it. Now you're starting to see the nature of this reality. And if that is the case, then we are playing the rules that they give us. That's why people like John Mack can go to London. This is interesting. And step out in front of a car and forget to look one way. He instantly dies. Meanwhile, 3 or 4 other John Macks in London that night died as well. What is that? That is the intelligence stepping into this world, moving pieces around, and then stepping back. And people go on with their business, not realizing what just entered in and what just left. And what terrifies me the most is the fact that we have been convinced of the paranormal, that as if that's where the intelligence lies, when in fact it may be the person driving the car next to us. It could be something so normal.
Yeah.
Where we think that this death was, that was done, that heart attack, and meanwhile it was paranormal. I found within one ritual, just one, I found every field of research under the umbrella of demonology. All of it, in one simple incantation, one ritual. And it made me think, is it possible this ritual was being performed throughout the ages in one experiencer caught one glimpse, one ingredient of the ritual, and another one, another ingredient, and it's not until the 21st century somebody like me comes forward and saying, hey, listen, all of these ingredients make up one ritual. The likelihood of that being the case accidentally, not there. And you know what kind of ritual it was? Self-replication of species. When an adept, a mage, magi, a sorcerer, which by the way, that's what we're talking about, the occult, sorcery, which we'll get into my case study with the Multers here in a second. Yes, where the mage is an adept, he cannot procreate. That's the disability of being, to be without being a being. That's your need, that's your motive. Goes and finds a woman, puts her in a deep sleep, that's your dream demon. Inseminates her with the fetus, that's your incubus. Implants his consciousness in it. Well, hey, that sounds like the debug phenomenon. 2 pulses in one body. There's possession and pregnancy within one experiencer. Now you go into the Apocrypha of John, no wonder they were making bodies in the images of their apparitions. See it?
Yeah.
All of it is the self-replication of species. Now, why in the world, now knowing this information, why would I be so intellectually infantile to suggest that it's in their best interest to kill us all? No. And might I suggest, if you do hear that later on after hearing this interview, if you hear that from a researcher, think about that. How deep does their knowledge of this intelligence really go? Did they get their theory off the bumper sticker on a Tahoe in a Trader Joe's parking lot? Or have they done the research to realize, wait a minute, you want to talk about a hitchhiker? They got a hitch on something.
Have you given any thought to, I mean, you must have. I mean, you probably all you think about as to what is this possibly AI?
It's conscious AI. Think of a biological avatar, of course. But again, if we're looking at something, for instance, okay, during all of possession literature, I'm talking hundreds and hundreds of cases where the host did not match even the gender of the possessing spirit. Or the host did not, it had different facial features and all of that. And so that's why when you get into Ian Stevenson's work, which we talked about that the other day after the awakening at the hotel, just hanging out, where Ian Stevenson encountered case studies of past lives, which is exactly what we're talking about, where the individual says, yeah, my name was so-and-so, okay? Yeah, this is where I died. And so they pulled up the picture of that person that died, and they look at the lady they're talking to, mirror images. See what they're doing? I think, again, that is a character. It's a sign of what's going on within ufology, or what we would call UFO abduction phenomenon. How many times? Well, bodies are just containers. Well, that's exactly the way they're treating them. It's like clothing. I want to have my own style. So literally, it's not AI in a sense. It is a way of self-replicating consciousness. And the idea is that if it doesn't have a body for too long, it changes. And so the idea is to create copies of bodies or clones. Now, that's not a modern understanding. That came from the Apocrypha of John. It makes copies of bodies. This means, quite literally, okay, let's go down this little narrative here. It means that all the bodies are copies of each other. But it also can mean that all of those bodies are copies of one consciousness.
Frightening.